we'll make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Babergh Planning Committee. I will now ask the Governance Officer to read out the domestic arrangements and the fire regulations. Claire, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptop is also switched to silent. We'll be using the e-voting for this meeting on the ModGov app, so please could members make sure they're logged in and ready to use the app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering the meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point, which is Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing the fire exit at the ends of each floor. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Introductions. This morning, Area Planning Manager Mark Russell is with us, our Legal Advisor Ian Dupre, Case Officers Samantha Summers and Elizabeth Flood, and our Governance Officer Claire Philpott, you've already met. Can I move to the agenda, please? Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence? And
None received, Chair.
no substitutions in that case. Are there any declarations of interest from anyone? No? Okay. Moving on. Confirmation of the minutes held on the 22nd of February. You all should have had a copy by now. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of these minutes? If not, could I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Osborne, Councillor Jameson to second. Show hands or just We're going to do electronic vote. Claire, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, members. That is now in progress. Councillor Beer.
4.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 11 votes for. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Notice of petitions.
None received.
Site inspections. Any requests? No? Thank you. We'll move on to schedule of planning applications. We have a comment here on PL 2229 from the Area Planning Manager.
Thank you, Chair. This is already covered in the tabled papers, but I just wanted to remind members that since publication of the agenda, the joint local plan has advanced. On the 16th of March, the modifications for Part 1 were published and it's now out to consultation. So these policies now have added weight. Before they were limited weight, now they have added weight. They're still not part of the development plan, but they are progressing. I see shakings of head.
It's just that in some cases, added weight is not a benefit. Limited weight is better.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Right. We will move on to DC 21-01802, land south of Honeysuckle Cottage, Little Orchard, Holbrook. Can I just confirm, Councillor McLaren, that she's going to speak as a ward member rather than stay in the committee?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now invite the case officer, Samantha Summers, to introduce the application to the committee. Sam, all yours.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This application is a hybrid scheme in outline for the erection of 4 self-built detached dwellings and includes the access point and full planning permission for 4 two-bedroom dwellings with landscaping, vehicular and pedestrian accesses. The application comes to committee as it is considered to be controversial. The parish council, the ward member and 48 households objected to the scheme and 4 households supported the application. The application site is land south of Honeysuckle Cottage, Little Orchard in Holbrook. Holbrook is classed as a core village in the core strategy. Core villages act as the focus for development within their functional clusters because of the level of services and amenities they provide to residents. The site sits behind existing dwellings on Church Hill and the fire station that is located on the corner of Church Hill and Hyams Lane. This is the village of Holbrook, and the built-up area boundary is shown with the orange line. The site sits in the southern part of the village and is shown in pink. The site sits outside of the built-up area boundary. This aerial photograph shows the site in pink in context to its surroundings. Most of the built form of the village is located to the north of the site. The site wraps around the fire station on 2 sides. There is open countryside to the south and west of the site. Committee members carried out a site inspection on the 27th of October 2021. This plan shows the location of services within the village in context to where the site is located. There are bus stops along Ipswich Road and Church Hill. The high school is located up here, the primary school just here. We have the village hall, the co-op store and the doctor's surgery and children's play area, all in this area here. All Saints Church is directly opposite the site. The site is considered to be well located to access these facilities by foot along made-up footpaths. This plan shows the constraints of the site. The main constraint is the Suffolk Coast and Heaths area of outstanding natural beauty, which is shown with the green area to the south of the site. The Grade 2 star-listed All Saints Church sits to the east of the site. The green circles that you might be able to see in this area here and just here are protected trees. There are none on the site itself. This is the proposed site layout. The 4 self-build units are in outline and therefore we do not have details of the exact layout, design, scale or landscaping at this time. They're located in this northern area of the site. The details of those units would come forward as a reserved matters application. The self-builds are located in the northern section of the site. The 4 two-bedroomed units would be located in the southern section, just here. The access to the site would be from Hyams Lane to the south. This would utilise an existing informal access to the site that has become overgrown over time. There's an existing pond on the site which is to be retained close to the site entrance. A communal bike area for storing cycles would be located at the entrance to the site. 8 cycles would be provided for in that area. There are 4 dwellings with private gardens, and there's parking spaces, 2 parking spaces provided for each dwelling along here and here, and also 2 visitors parking bays, so a total of 10 parking spaces for this full planning part of the scheme. The dwellings have been located outside of the sewage treatment plant odour zone, which is not very clear on this plan, but is shown with a blue line, just cutting across the site. The hedge boundary would be communally managed outside of the residents' gardens, which would be divided by a post and rail fence. A pedestrian access would be provided between Wheelwright's Cottage and Jubilee House, following the demolition of the garage to Jubilee House. So just in this section here, and would pop out onto Church Hill. Highways have raised no objection to the vehicular or pedestrian access points, although Hyams Lane is very narrow and has been subject to many concerns raised by the objectors. The design of the proposed two-bedroom dwellings is contemporary and would be in the form of a terrace. The dwellings would be finished in clay hanging tiles, vertical timber boarding, red brick, clay plain tile roof, and recessed PV solar panels to the roof. This drawing shows the heights of the dwellings in comparison with other structures nearby. We have the church over here. We have the fire station training tower just sitting behind here. And then to the left of that plan, we have some existing houses. This is shown from the western viewpoint, with the land falling away to the south. These are the floor plans and the roof plans of the two-bedroom units. This shows the proposed development site and how it would sit with the existing built form around the site. So the site is just here. Although this is a superseded plan, the drawing has slightly changed through the course of the application. This just gives you an indication of how the site would sit with its buildings and just showing the context with the existing buildings around the site. This plan shows the proposed access point to the site, and you can see the contemporary nature of the buildings just here, and the planting that would be put in place. This plan shows the vehicular access onto Hyams Lane, with the visibility displays shown in pink, all within the highway verge area. This is the proposed landscaping plan. The site is not within the area of outstanding natural beauty, but is adjacent to it. The comments of the AOMB officer have been addressed on the widening of Hyams Lane. The lane is to be retained in its current form. Some maintenance will be required to the existing hedgerow for cutting back to make sure that we have the necessary visibility displays. The development is not considered to be harmful to the setting of the AOMB. Some trees are to be removed from the site. However, further planting is proposed to offset any loss of the trees on the site. The site is well screened from wider landscape views. This shows the planting and landscaping around the access point and shows the visibility displays and the planting set back from those visibility displays. Again, this plan just shows that planting that is proposed outside of the visibility displays to help screen the site from the area of outstanding natural beauty. Moving on to some photographs of the site and the surroundings. This photograph is taken from the proposed access with the fire station drill tower. You can just see that on the left-hand side of the photograph. The row of terraces would be located here, with that existing hedgerow screening it from the wider landscape views. This is taken looking along south, sorry, get my words out, south, and looking at that existing hedgerow. This is looking towards that fire station drill tower. This is looking back from the site to the access point onto Hyams Lane. This one is looking from the access point along Hyams Lane back towards Church Hill. You have the fire station actually on the left-hand side of that photograph. This is the location of the proposed pedestrian access onto Church Hill. And this is looking from the same point, but in the opposite direction, down the hill towards where Hyams Lane Junction is, and which is just beyond that car. This application has been received following the refusal of a previous scheme in 2020, DC 20-01474. That was also for a hybrid scheme of outline planning for 4 self-build units and for full planning permission for 5 dwellings, all of them being 2-bedroom dwellings with vehicular access off Hyams Lane and the pedestrian access to Church Hill. The application was refused for 3 reasons. Works were required for the access and it would be detrimental to the rural character of Hyams Lane, the impact on the setting of the AOMB, and also there was no unilateral agreement to find a traffic regulation order to move the speed limit sign. The revised scheme has addressed those reasons for refusal with no objections from the AOMB team or from Highways. The application has been assessed under policy CS11 of the core strategy. The application submission did not include a suitable local housing needs assessment and has, therefore, not provided the required evidence for a need for the housing. Since the application was submitted, the Holbrook neighbourhood plan has been to examination and it is now at an advanced stage. Therefore, the policies are given great weight. The neighbourhood plan specifies that all new housing development should be contained within the settlement boundary. The application provides 4 smaller 2-bed units, which the neighbourhood plan has identified a need for in the village. However, it fails to target a specific identified need for 1-bed homes and for bungalows. Furthermore, the council has sufficient planning permissions relating to self-build units in Babergh. All of the dwellings are market housing and are not affordable, which the neighbourhood plan has actually identified as a need. The site and proposal does not reach the thresholds to provide affordable housing on this particular scheme because it's less than 10 dwellings and under 0.5 hectares. The neighbourhood plan, I would draw your attention to paragraphs 3.11 and 3.18 in your reports, which does detail the need aspect for the housing. The scheme is considered to not meet the needs of the village. Holbrook has already reached its numbers for new dwellings. Another change in policy is the way that the joint local plan is accredited. The plan is at public consultation and is therefore given added weight in decision making. Policy SP03 is sustainable location of new development. Development is required to be within the settlement boundary unless the site is allocated for development or is identified in a neighbourhood plan. The application is identified as neither of these. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal as it is contrary to policy CS11, policies contained within the neighbourhood plan and also the JLP. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for the officer? Councillor Busby, I saw you first.
Thank you, Chair. Sam, could we go back to slide 17, please? It actually hasn't got a number. Keep going. That one. What concerns me with this is that we know that flattens the slope. It is quite a steep slope, isn't it, the access to the site? And we know that the pond is on the left-hand side as we look at it. But it looks to me as though any any rain that falls onto the road or path is going to come streaming down because that part slopes also left to right, even though that would appear to be contrary to the way that the road goes. Is that an optical illusion?
No, you're quite right. The site is actually on a hillside. So, yes, the land falls away to Hyams Lane. If members are minded to approve the scheme, we would require a condition for surface water drainage details to ensure that no water is flooding out onto Hyams Lane.
Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you put up slide 25, which I think was your last one? And the officer, you did sort of refer to 311 and 318, but what I want to ask you, it says fails to address, and what is specifically a local identified need? What is the specific local identified need?
So the local identified need wasn't addressed as part of the application submission. Normally we would receive a local housing needs assessment. However, because the neighbourhood plan actually has that contained within it, we've used and referenced that as our need because the village have already identified what the need is. So 1-bedroom units, smaller units, units for older people. So this scheme doesn't actually provide any bungalows, for example. So yes, in some parts it has actually addressed the 2-bedroom units, but the mix, well, there isn't a mix. It's all just 2-bedroom units. So what the parish would have liked to have seen, I'm sure, is something with 1-bedroom units, something for older people, so maybe a bungalow or two, but because it's all just one type of mix.
So can I come back on that, Mr. Chairman? So what you're actually saying then that we haven't done a housing need, there's not been one presented other than using the local neighbourhood plan which comments on local need.
Yes.
Is that sufficient then?
It is, yeah.
Councillor Beer, sorry, that the AECOM studies that were done to, AECOM, AECOM studies which were done to inform the Holbrook neighbourhood plan, that's the technical document that we're looking at.
Oh, Councillor Barrett, sorry, I couldn't see your hand behind Councillor Hinton.
I always get a bit worried. So the local neighbourhood plan hasn't been adopted at the moment. So it just sits there. So what weight are we required to give to a document that hasn't been adopted? Because in my view, it's still obviously in the ether. It's not an adopted policy position. And we seem to be placing quite a lot of weight on something that hasn't been adopted. So are we I think this is an issue that we need to do, because if it's not adopted, clearly it's not adopted, and we wouldn't use a plan that's not adopted. When it's adopted, then it becomes in place, and then we have something to work with. But until such times that is adopted, would I be right in thinking that we should just note it? Because we should be getting a double standard on what is.
Okay, let's get you an answer.
Well,
Can I just start off with the
yes, I was
area
going to
planning
say,
man?
Chair, let Mark first, and I'll add if I have
Yeah.
to, yes.
The Holbrook neighbourhood plan is now at referendum stage. The examiner's report came out a couple of weeks ago, so it's given quite a bit of weight, significant weight. Not full weight, because it's not part of the development plan yet. It could feasibly fail at referendum. Our experience is, bar one example, that doesn't happen. And the likelihood is, when it gets to referendum, it's likely that it will be supported. So we have to sort of consider sensibly what the likely outcome is. So we give it significant weight, and the direction of travel would suggest that it's going to be made at some point later this year. So in this case, we give it significant weight. The difference with the JLP is it's at an earlier consultation stage, so that's got less weight than this has.
Thank you. Ian, please.
I agree totally. I couldn't do better myself. It's not yet, as we always say, as members are well aware, the development plan under the legislation is the starting point for your decision. The neighbourhood plan is being not yet adopted, isn't part of the development plan. However, as Mark says, given the advanced state of the neighbourhood plan, it's a material consideration that Mark is quite rightly advising you should have significant weight.
Thank you. Councillor Parity, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just so also, and the we also brought in the joint local plan, as Mark mentioned, has now gone to another stage. But again, it has not been adopted. It is not policy. Yes, it's in the mix. I just feel there's rather a lot of possibles that we're looking at here, which are not actually policies that we can hang our hats on. It's slightly confusing. I wish we had a clearer idea. So we're asked to put weight.
Are you
Well,
asking a question?
can I just get my question in, please,
Please,
Mr. Chairman?
good.
We're being asked to put our decisions based on possible future adoption of policy. I don't think that's particularly acceptable when we're asked twice to do it. I mean, once possibly, and I think neighbourhood plans, we all agree, they are the local issues and the local position.
Question,
But I think this is we need to have clarity on this, and it's not clear.
Okay.
In this instance, I would place considerable weight on the neighbourhood plan and somewhat less weight on the JLP.
Thank you. Sorry. Councillor Holt.
Carrying on with this theme, if I may, so how much weight do we give to our current local plan? And also, the officer mentioned in the presentation that Holbrook's housing numbers have been met, I believe. And where is this data drawn from? Are we looking at the emerging joint local plan, which does have housing numbers for specific core villages? Or are we referring to other information and data that's relevant to our current local plan? Or are we just referring to data from the neighbourhood plan? It's confusing to say the least, but how much weight does our current local plan have, and where did those housing numbers come from?
So the housing number for 58 comes from the consultation draft of the JLP. So that's the work that Babergh and Suffolk has done, and Holbrook is using that as a benchmark to say that's what our need is.
So those numbers come from the new joint local plan,
Yes.
not from the current local plan.
Not from the current local
The
plan.
new joint local plan has got some weight, but not much weight, but we're using the data in there,
Yeah.
specifically on this case, as evidence to say they've met the housing need.
What you find is that
That's confusing.
Yeah, I know, it completely is, I know. What you do find is that the plan itself, whilst it may be delayed and carry less weight, that the documents backing it up quite often carry more weight. So there's been research done into the housing numbers, and the figure that came up for Holbrook was 58, as opposed to the 69 that have been delivered. So therefore there's a surfeit there. But the JLP itself, as a whole document, carries a bit more now than limited weight. It carries less weight. Yeah, welcome to our job.
But the question is that, as I say, specifically the officer mentioned the number of houses, which clearly is a defined comment. You've met the need. But actually, it's referring to a plan that has got limited weight. Why are we referring to numbers that is in a plan that has limited weight, where we have a joint local plan, that we don't seem to be referring to in that regard on this matter?
Yeah, you have to just to take a sort of sober assessment of the information before you, and the 58 is the figure that emerged during the JLP, so that's the figure that we work with, indeed, which informs the Holbrook neighbourhood plan.
So, to try and clarify this, may I ask Ian the question? When we take data from one document to another, it doesn't lessen its truth. Is that correct?
Well, I think Chair, Mark is drawing a distinction, if I'm understanding correctly, between the document itself that's still not formally adopted and the evidence base behind it, which we have every reason to believe is reliable. Have I understood you correctly, Mark, there?
Sam, do you want, these questions are all meant to be coming to you, but we seem to,
No, that's fine.
seem to have moved away from it.
So it is really confusing. We're in a state of flux at the moment, but I think it's important for members to remember that currently the most weight is given to CS11. CS11 of our current core strategy. From that point on, less weight is given. So first of all, it's the core strategy, then it's the neighbourhood plan, and then it's the JLP. So this application actually fails CS11 because it's not meeting an identified need, which the neighbourhood plan has actually specified within its context, which is given great weight. The MPPF actually says that as the neighbourhood plans progress, they are given more weight. So we're now on the last stage before it goes to referendum. Therefore, it's given great weight in this particular instance.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor McCraw, you had a question.
Yeah, this is partly for Sam and partly for Mark, but officers in general can probably comment. Are we not obliged, in policy terms, to take the most recent and informed evidence as to housing need based on information available? Because, yes, the original core strategy dates to 2013, adopted in 2015. Now, it would be foolish for us, I think, and we want to get confirmation of this, for us to be assuming that an assessment made 8 years ago would still be current and up to date. We're constantly updating our housing need and we make assessments. And surely there's actually a statutory duty to include the most recent evidence as to housing need in considerations, and that's why we ascribe different bits of weight to different evidence. So can I just ask if that is a good or fair statement of the position if we're regarding housing need, that we don't just throw something out of it completely because it's not original. Nothing is static. That's why we have emerging plans. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and that's why CS11 actually requires the housing needs assessment to form part of the application submission. And when we don't have one, we refer to the neighbourhood plan because that's the most up-to-date document that we have.
And CS11 specifically is adopted and fits the bill as regards these other questions, specifically states that we should use the most recent evidence in assessing housing need. So that, in fact, is up to adopted policy.
Yeah, but we should make it clear that the neighbourhood plan isn't yet adopted. It's only been to examination. But yes, it's the most recent information that we have on housing need in Holbrook.
But it's covered by the provisions of CS11. Would that be correct?
Yes,
Thank
I think so. Unless Ian thinks otherwise. Okay.
Councillor Hinton, you had a...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, just to confuse matters even more for everybody, of course, if you looked at the latest monitoring report, it would show that we've got 4,000 odd permissions granted across the district, which is a hell of a lot more than we need for the next 10 years anyway. So on that basis, we wouldn't give anything any permission, but that doesn't work that way. The question I have for Sam is,
I think you can probably see it on slide 22, but the width of the actual access point proposed and the width of Highams Lane at that point, because that shows clearly how wide a Highams Lane is, or not very wide Highams Lane is, but the artist impression, if you like to call it that, of the proposed access into the development site seems to show something big enough to act as an entrance for Tesco's, isn't it?
Yeah, so the previous application was refused on highways ground because the widening of the lane we felt would ruin the character, that rural character of Highams Lane. With this particular application, they've addressed that by cutting back the highway verge to make the visibility displays much better, and therefore Highways did not raise an objection to the scheme this time.
So how wide is the access point?
I'm afraid that I don't know the answer to that.
In Highams Lane?
I don't know.
It'd be nice to have had highways here, wouldn't it? But you explained there about turn, but
We have the highways officer with us. Would you like to invoke help from him? He's on the screen. Hello, Ben.
Good morning.
Can you help with that question about the width of the lane and the width of the entrance?
Yes, the entrance is such a width because of the lack of width of Highams Lane. So the entrance width and radii have to be large to accept the necessary vehicles, because the carriageway width is limited there. It widens out towards the junction with Church Hill, so there would be a degree of vehicles having to wait for others to pass, because it narrows down to a single track width close to the new access point. But in terms of us objecting, the scale of this of the proposal and forecast vehicle trips, which is only I think it was 6 in the peak hour maximum. So in terms of a severe impact, we don't have anything to sort of hang it on as such. So and even the site is proposing a separate footpath access onto Church Hill, means that it shouldn't increase any pedestrian usage of Highams Lane in that area, which would be our greater concern.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Hinton, you asked the question. Do you want to?
if I could come back and say, well, that may not, the development may not increase the pedestrian traffic onto Highams Lane, but there is already existing traffic along Highams Lane, and this is going to be impacted by the vehicles coming out. And so they're coming out of a nice big wide entrance into a narrow little lane. Isn't this going to cause confusion, and hasn't the change in attitude from the county highways exacerbated that situation?
Well, I think it's the volume of traffic here. The Highams Lane is very quiet, as it is the applicant carried out traffic volume and speed surveys for the application, and the volumes are very small. It's around sort of 12 to 18 existing in peak hours. Then this proposal could put a 6 onto this section in the peak hours. So we're still only talking about sort of across the peak hour would only be one vehicle every 3 minutes or so. So it's not something that we could uphold an objection on.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Hinton, you have a...
Yeah, just one last point. That may be so, but it doesn't account for the existing pedestrian and cycle and potential equestrian traffic that might be going down there. You can measure vehicles, yes, but there are other forms of transport, should we say, that are using that lane, which will increase it at certain times, and they're more at risk, if you like, than vehicles are.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that proposed footpath connection onto Church Hill could also be used by the existing pedestrian traffic.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any more questions for the officer? No? Thank you very much, Sam. And we will move on. I understand we have a representative from the Parish Council, Mr. John Ambrose. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Ambrose, I'm Chairman of the Holbrook Parish Council. Holbrook Parish Council objects to this application, and we have objected to the previous 3 applications on this site which have all been refused. We also believe the reasons for refusal for those applications are still valid and equally apply to this application. The reasons for our objections can broadly be summarised as: firstly, the application is in conflict with our newly examined neighbourhood plan. Secondly, the access is inappropriate and unsafe both during construction and also when the development is completed. Thirdly, the environmental impact of this application to achieve the required width of the lane and to achieve the required visibility would result in unacceptable hedgerow loss and damage to the roots and trees and loss of amenity to adjoining residents. Fourthly, the housing proposed does not meet the identified needs of the parish, and there is no affordable housing included. Holbrook began its neighbourhood plan journey in 2018 and undertaken considerable public consultation, community engagement and evidence gathered to support the development over the number of years. This has seen the plan being successful at the independent examiner, and the examiner issued her report on the 20th of February recommending we go forward to the referendum. Both Parish Council and Babergh District Council are happy with the modifications suggested by the examiner, and we're now waiting the referendum. The work of the plan means we are clear on the views of the local community, and we know that this proposal is not consistent with the views expressed. Local people are in favour of affordable housing that meets local needs such as affordable housing and bungalows. The parish is incredibly sensitive in terms of its environment, both its landscape through the area of outstanding natural beauty designation and its wildlife through the various designation. The area is so sensitive that environmental screening of the neighbourhood plan has been undertaken twice, and this has resulted in changes to our draft policy wording. Even very small levels of development can potentially have a detrimental effect on the environment of the parish. You will see from the committee papers that post-examination neighbourhood plan is to be afforded due weight in decision making and has a significant bearing on this application. The recommendation of refusal is the correct one and is supported by the Parish Council.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the Parish Council? Councillor Busby, your hand was up first.
Thank you. You identified this as not a site that you want to bring forward in the neighbourhood plan. Do you have any sites that you've have identified to fill the gap that we've seen in the numbers?
Yes, we have sites throughout the village identified, but this was not put forward during the consultation or the call for sites, and a site adjacent to it was recommended by ACOM as not suitable.
sorry, so you've got enough sites to cover the shortfall in
Yes.
the numbers that are identified in it?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Just one thought. We keep talking about this site not producing the right mix of housing. If a proposal came forward for, say, 4 two-bedroom bungalows, a couple of one-bedroom flats and 2 or 3 two-bedroomed houses, which could be affordable, would that change your view in terms of the acceptability of the site?
No, because the site is outside the area of the village development, and even changing the mix of the housing would not comply with the requirements. We'd still have the issue of accessibility and the damage to the environment.
Thank you for answering a question you needn't have answered. Councillor Barrett.
I clearly by your presentation and your what you put on the on our papers here, that the parish council clearly has concerns regarding the highways. That seems to be your main concern.
No, it's not just that. It's the fact that it doesn't meet the housing needs identified in the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah, because it would be difficult to actually go against the recommendation of the county council, wouldn't it, as the highways authority? I mean, you've listed many reasons, traffic reasons, but of course we sort of tend to have to dismiss those because we have to take the recommendation of the highways, the experts. So although you're obviously putting that down, and to me, you've given a great deal of weight to the traffic and the access, but of course we have experts' opinion from just now that says that isn't an issue, and that the traffic volumes are very low in that lane. So,
Question, please.
well, the question is, are you being unrealistic with your objections on traffic and access when we hear from the experts that isn't an issue?
I can only speak as somebody who lives locally and often walks a lane, and I know from personal experience it is a very narrow lane, and it's not just traffic that we're objecting to. As the officer mentioned, the neighbourhood plan policies 1 and 2 are not met by this development.
Thank you. Councillor Holt.
How many sites have you got in your emerging neighbourhood plan for development?
I believe it's 4.
And are they all within the area settlement boundary?
Yes, I believe so.
Can we get confirmation from an officer?
That was confirmed in our papers. I think you're fine. If you could find it, please, Sam, just to confirm that. But I think it was confirmed in the papers. I seem to remember me reading it, so if I read it, it's got to be there. Right, while we're doing that, any more questions? No? Thank you very much. We now have an objector, Mr. Simon Quantrill. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes.
You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Simon Quantrill and I live at Brackenwood, Hyams Lane. I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbours in Hyams Lane and on Church Hill as we all object to this application. I hope you received my email yesterday from which you all know I want to persuade you that this planning application should be refused because it's the wrong development in the wrong place. We are pleased that the committee report recommends that planning permission should be refused because in terms the application does not represent sustainable development and does not comply with the policy CS11 and the emerging joint local plan policy SP03 and importantly policies 01 and 02 of the recently examined Holbrook neighbourhood plan, because essentially the proposed development is outside of the settlement boundary, putting it in direct conflict with these policies. Paragraph 13.7 of the committee report confirms that there are no material considerations that allow you to ignore these policies and permit you to grant permission. However, there are other planning reasons why you should refuse permission, and these include the fact that Hyams Lane is a much-loved, quiet, single-track country lane, no more than 4 metres wide at the entrance, used by so many people for walking, running and cycling. That is why the new access road at the narrowest part of Hyams Lane would create increased traffic conflict between cars, pedestrians and cyclists. It would also harm the rural character of the lane, especially because of the amount of construction works required to cut into the 1.5 metre banks which exist, contrary to the pictures from the developer. We wish to challenge Suffolk Highway's recent about-face to allow the access road to be built with reduced visibility splays. Even though Hyams Lane is such a narrow road, the only reason given for this change was the assumption that there's no parking in Hyams Lane, but in reality there is, and we have shown you that with our photographs. All previous highway requirements quoted the standard full specification for visibility displays. It would be wrong and dangerous to allow substandard visibility displays now. The impact of the fire station has been greatly underestimated. Any new residents would soon complain about the noise, water spray and light interference. From my own experience, there is an ongoing odour problem from the waste treatment plant. No odour assessment has been provided. I can assure you that the first 2 houses on the proposed site will definitely experience the same problems as we do from odour. In 2021, planning consent was refused for a new access at the same location because the proposal, due to its location, scale, layout and the necessary works which would be required to provide a safe access, would be detrimental to the rural character of Hyams Lane. Please accept today the recommendation of the committee report and refuse planning permission today for the same reasons as given in 2021. Nothing has changed.
Thank you. My question, sir, you stated that the access was substandard.
Yes.
I was under the impression that the Highways Authority have accepted that this is acceptable, displays have been done. So can I have that confirmed by our officers or somebody as to whether it is substandard or whether the experts, Highway Department, are saying this is okay?
Councillor Beer, you know that that's what the Highways member has said.
I know what the Highways have said, but I want it confirmed in this room because it was accused that it was substandard. Now, it may be substandard. I want to know whether the gentleman there is right or not. Thank you.
But the gentleman is entitled to his opinion. I agree. And I think we can confirm from Sam that the Highways have said it is okay.
Yeah, Highways have raised no objection to this scheme.
So it's not substandard.
Ben
Well-
has already
Well,
said
for clarification, you're asking whether the Highways have relaxed their standards, and I think we're going to have to ask them that because I don't have that information to hand.
Can
But
we
they
stick-
haven't objected.
We'll stick to asking questions to the objector. We'll come back to that when we reach the debate stage. Thank you. Any more questions for the objector?
Can I answer the question?
You can, if you think you need to.
The reality is that Suffolk Highways have changed their position over the last 3 years, and including on this planning application, about what's required. Originally, and until quite recently, they required Hyams Lane to be widened. But when the objections were met, and they accepted that widening Hyams Lane would remove all the hedge and all the trees, which was unacceptable, they then asked for the
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I'll remind you, I'm chairing the meeting, not you.
On the point of order and clarification, Mr. Chairman, the comments just made, if we asked our Highways officer could comment on that.
I'm in communications now with Councillor Beer, so he'll give a response in a minute.
We will get a response,
Yes.
thank
Yes,
you. I'm quite happy to hear what the member of the public's saying, but I now want it confirmed or denied or whatever by the Highways officer, because it's an important point. We're always told, and we object, like you, sir, are objecting on lots of the applications that we don't agree with the highways. But we're told it's the experts and we cannot alter it.
Chance to reply on the difference between what he said and what the official advice was, and I think I'm not sure he completed what his answer is.
I think we must let him finish.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
Thank you. The point I'm making is that for all of the applications which have been previously refused, the full specification for the standard visibility display of the X dimension of 2.4 metres and the Y dimension of 43 metres tangential to the near side edge of the carriageway was required. Here, late in the day, i.e. January this year, highways have said, okay, the only way we can allow this now is to allow you to have reduced visibility displays. We will narrow those, but it doesn't make sense because they've required for the last 3 years in all previous applications the full specification of their standard visibility display. Now, on the narrowest part of Himes Lane, they're suggesting it will be safe to have a much reduced visibility display. And they justify that on the basis that there's no car parking in Himes Lane. But we have produced evidence, photographic evidence, to demonstrate that there's regularly cars parking in Himes Lane close to the proposed access site, which will cause
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you're now allowing a debate by a member of the public of our committee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Beer. May I? Please, Mark, yes, respond.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Quantrill. I can confirm, yes, it's correct that they did change their position. We had a meeting, I can't remember, the back end of last year or early this year, with Highways and with the AONB team, because there's an antagonism between the landscape and the highway safety. As you know, it just kept going backwards and forwards. So got them into a meeting to say, is this achievable in any way at all? And the Highway Authority's position was that they changed their position, basically. They relaxed their views. And that was in part based on the speed survey result. So the answer I've got here from the Highway Authority is that I asked, are the displays substandard? And the response was, they're in accordance with the speed survey results, and the only adjustment is due to the width of the lane being single track. So it was a speed survey. In terms of the conversation about the parking, which you've presented to them, and they seem to not respond to, I can't answer that. But in terms of the displays, it was the speed survey that informed that.
The issue of the parking is in...
Wait, please wait. Thank you, Mark. I think you've had the opportunity to make your point. I think we've got to the situation where the highways have changed their minds. You object, and you have every right to do so, and you've expressed yourself today. Thank you. I think we better move on. Are there any more questions for the objector? No? Right. Thank you. We now have a supporter, Mr. William Saunders. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Yes, I'm William Saunders. I live in Holbrook. I strongly support this application. I speak for many in the village of Holbrook who would really like to see an imaginative housing scheme such as this, the village and hopefully the larger district can be proud of. By way of background, I moved into Holbrook with my family, young family and my wife, 5 years ago. At the time of moving, we faced a very limited choice of housing and finally decided on the new development at Admiral's Quarter. We enjoy all that Holbrook has to offer, young families, and we regularly walk and cycle around the village. But if this scheme had been available to us 5 years ago, we had perhaps been there much sooner than we were. And because this scheme has been sidelined so many times, other families like us are being denied the opportunity to move to Holbrook. The Holbrook neighbourhood plan has identified that truly affordable property, either to buy or to rent, is necessary to keep the younger generation in the village. This application is offering well-designed property to rent and the opportunity to address the government's targets for self-build. There are so many big and enormous developments shooting up all around us, particularly on the edge of Ipswich, but in a village environment we want to encourage small schemes such as this one, which enhances the community. The houses are designed to pick up local features with thoughtful landscape surroundings, alluding to what I believe was previously an orchard. The new residents would be close to established neighbours and facilities, but discreetly screened from the traffic on the main road. I would suggest that there is a wonderful opportunity for Babergh councillors and officers to get behind this fantastic scheme, in my opinion, and designed by an award-winning architect, and I fully support it and think we could have something here that we could be very proud of. Thank you.
Thanks. Are you aware of the neighbourhood plan? Have you read the neighbourhood plan?
I have, but please don't ask me to go into depth and to the specifics of it. But yes, I have, and we were part of that consultation.
Good. Okay. You've heard that there were 4 sites that have been put forward by the village.
Yes, indeed.
Would you prefer this site over any of the 4 that have been put forward, and if so, why?
Well, this one is the only one that I have witnessed being developed and had seen the plans of in such detail as you've shown here, and for the reasons that I've said, young family, etc., etc., these are appealing developments that would attract similar people to the area, in my belief.
But we'll ask it slightly differently. If the other 4 were developed, would there be a need for this one being the 5th?
The other 4, I'm not sure how close they are to being developed, at what stage they're at. This one may be further down the line than the others. So it's a difficult question to answer.
Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The point you made in your comments was that you felt this would encourage local people and more young people coming into the village. It's rather good to hear that side view, because often we don't hear that. How confident are you of that particular comment you made?
Well, certainly in Holbrook and the surrounding area, affordable housing for young professionals is extremely difficult to come by. I worked at the Royal Hospital School before, so I didn't have that problem until actually I finished work there and thought, well, where can I move to? And the opportunities, the options are extremely limited.
Thank you. Councillor McCraw.
Sorry about that. Thanks very much for putting your thoughts forward, Mr. Saunders. You've stated that you need in Holbrook affordable housing, but isn't it true that this is actually full market value, whether that be a market rent or market value for purchase?
Yes, I imagine so, as was the house that we bought as well on Admiral Quarter.
Okay, just saying there's a difference here in affordable, and I know what affordable actually means in even planning terms, 8 times, but the average wage around here is opposed to 11. But can I ask, and I hope you don't mind, but I think it's a reasonable question, do you have any connection with the applicants in any way? Because we always have to declare if we have any conflict of interests.
There's no conflict of interest. We worked together a long while ago, but that is it.
So you know the applicants?
I know, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
but
and you say you were involved in the as a consultee in the local neighbourhood plan.
Yes.
Were you a member of the local neighbourhood planning group of any way?
No.
So do you generally approve of the neighbourhood plan for Holbrook?
I approve of it because it's a fantastic area which needs, as I said, plans in it for encouraging people of my age and younger into the area to make it sustainable and thrive and develop.
I'm just a little confused. It sounds like if you do approve of the neighbourhood plan, just not one of the specifics of the neighbourhood plan, which is specifically the two policies referred to in the planning application. That does seem slightly strange.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, I do not think the planning member has a right to interrogate a member of the public like that, and that's what it sounds like to me.
You're entitled to your opinion of the other members' questions.
I think it's an obvious
I don't think he was causing any offence at all.
No offence, no. I'm trying to understand what the point is of it.
Well,
Right,
specifically,
thank you.
Specifically, the point is that a neighbourhood plan is possibly about to be made, but has certainly gone through a process. And I just wondered that if you didn't see a little bit of conflict in accepting the principle of a neighbourhood plan, but not one of its main specific policies.
But then, as you've said already, the neighbourhood plan hasn't been adopted yet.
No, fair point.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for the Speaker? Councillor Holt.
Have you got any questions?
Have I? No. Thank you for asking, though.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may just say quickly, I'm not saying Councillor McCraw's question crossed any boundaries. That's not for me to say, but I think just that we've always, a supporter is a member of the community who supports the application. We've generally discouraged the slot being taken by a family member or an employee, but there's no hard and fast rule, and there's no a speaker such as this gentleman isn't required to make the same declarations that members are make.
I apologise if that was the way it came across.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, sir. We now have the applicant. Cathy Shelbourne, you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
It's Christoph who is first addressing the committee.
Okay,
I'm
I
following.
haven't got that on my list.
We're sharing duties.
Okay, 3 minutes between you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christoph, Director of TAS Architects. The proposal before you is a thoughtful, small-scale application for a mixed range of housing, which includes good quality 2-bed properties plus larger 3 and 4 bedroom self-build plots. This mix was chosen in response to the local needs plan at the time, back in 2021. This planning application was submitted in March 2021, exactly 2 years ago. The suggested entrance to the site extends only slightly further west than the existing houses to the south of Hymes Lane, namely Brackenwood, whose garden and outbuildings in fact extend well to the west of the proposal site. It should be noted that this site strategy has the support of Suffolk Highways. The existing land is overgrown with no visual or ecological merit. It is wedged between residential homes to the north and houses to the east and south. It is scruffy, bramble-hijacked infill territory, which we think can be enhanced with a beautiful landscape proposal encompassing a 2-metre deep landscape buffer, a communal orchard to replace the fruit trees that used to be on the site, and some well-designed, carefully positioned homes. It is encouraging to note that the planning officer concludes that the development does not have any adverse impact on the character or appearance of the area. It is an established principle of planning law that there must be harm arising from a development to justify withholding permission. We have looked closely at the surrounding vernacular and created a mix of contemporary, sustainable homes with a muted natural palette to complement the area. A recent project of ours, not dissimilar to this one, won a REBA award in 2021, where the judge commented, "If more backland sites were developed with this level of rigour and delight, we would reduce the housing crisis and improve the fabric of our towns and cities in equal measure." This scheme is a great opportunity to create something beyond the standard red brick houses one sees so regularly sprinkled around our countryside, and to build houses that will continue to evolve and enhance the area for years to come. What this proposal is not is a large development by a faceless national developer, producing the same houses no matter where they are in the country. This is a small, local scheme that we feel should be supported to improve the quality and variety of housing for people who are keen to live in this amazing place, as well as maybe become a positive example to encourage other smaller house builders to engage more in their local communities to create the broad mix of housing that this country needs. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Cathy Shelbourne, co-owner with my brother of the land at Holbrook, where we grew up. My mother was a school governor, my father a church warden. Over the decades, they contributed enormously to the community. We are very disappointed that our application has been constantly bypassed. Here is a scheme with attractive homes to rent and plots for self-builders, and the opportunity for the next generation to become part of that Holbrook community that we grew up in. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to the last speaker, the self-build, I think that's a very good scheme going forward. Have you had much sort of interest, or have you had any comments from the local people who may want to buy, or just locals generally? Because local build is a good idea, and I think you can get such a wonderful selection from bungalows to small dwellings to larger dwellings. So have you had any of that? Thank you.
Sorry, it hasn't been widely publicised, so at the moment it's just on paper. But I would say that the houses to the north of our plot were self-build as well. They were 3 self-builders, and hopefully they've become part of the fabric of the community too.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, have you got
Obviously, one of the reason this is being refused is that apparently there was no housing needs survey. What I'm asking is, as this application went in 2021, presumably you were basing your need on that point then in time?
We were. We referred to the local needs plan that was around at the time.
And at that time, what did that show or demonstrate?
It demonstrated, from my understanding of it, that we needed, or that Holbrook needed. I live in the area too, so there was a need for smaller 2-bed houses that were sort of more affordable, not necessarily affordable in the planning sense, but more affordable for younger families.
So the time you put the application in, you were basically fulfilling the housing need.
That's what we felt. Yeah.
Is that that's what you felt?
Yeah.
Is that what you were told by the officers at the time?
That was our reading of the local needs plan.
Okay.
The
other point I've got, which came up from the objectors, or not from the objectors, but the obviously neighbourhood plan. Did you try and submit your scheme to the parish council in the neighbourhood plan? And so you did submit it to them?
I talked to the chairman of the parish council before we submitted it.
And what response did you get from the parish council?
Oh, I'm sorry, it was a while ago. We had a good chat. And obviously it was a positive chat because we didn't go away and not submit it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Busby.
Actually, I think that's a very good point, Simon. It's a good question. So, when you'd had this chat, were you surprised that your site wasn't included, therefore, in the initial neighbourhood plan consultation?
I was surprised that we didn't have more support. You know, it is a jolly good scheme.
Sorry, Chair, I don't know whether it's possible to, I can see the Chair of Parish Council is keen to answer the question which I'd like to ask him, which is why didn't you include it in your neighbourhood plan?
If I think it will get to the bottom, I will have a go. Sir, would you like to briefly answer that if you can?
Yes, certainly. First of all, addressing the telephone conversation, it's a written policy of the parish council that no discussions pre-submission of planning application or no formal discussions take place. And certainly there was an informal discussion, and I recall that it was said that it should go to the parish council when the application was submitted. In response to the sites for the neighbourhood plan, there was a great deal of effort made to call for sites, and at the time of that, there was no submission by the applicant of this site for inclusion in the neighbourhood plan. And since the sites were evaluated, ACOM did indicate that if it was submitted as a site, it would have been identified as not suitable.
Thank you. Councillor Beer.
Mr. Chairman, you've allowed the Parish Council to come back quite rightly. I think the applicant, I'd like to know what their comments is on those last statement from the Parish Council, because it's important.
Let's finish any more questions, and then we can go back to that point if you would remind me. Are there any more questions? Right. You would now like... Oh.
I would like the applicant, the lady and the gentleman at the back there, to comment on what they've heard about their conversations with the Parish Council and how they interpreted it and how it was not sort of put in the local plan and what have you.
You're going to try and put it in the form of a question that might help clarify the situation.
If it is true that the applicants didn't put the site forward, can I ask if they did or why they didn't? I think that's the question, isn't it, Chair? Thank you.
It wasn't put forward in the call for sites because previous applications had been made, although they had been refused. It was felt that the application, this current application, could address those failings. And I'd like to point out that this application was being supported by the council up until about 2 weeks ago when the emerging local plan came out. So it's been 2 years of support. We expected to come to committee with support from the planning department. To be told 2 weeks ago that that support was being withdrawn as a result of this new local needs plan.
Thank you very much.
General point that if somebody in the village rings you up as chairman and says, what do you think about 2 houses in this location, you would, as a matter of practice, not say, oh, that sounds a jolly good idea, oh dear me, how terrible. You'd say, you must approach us formally. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. There is a policy adopted by the Parish Council that whilst somebody can informally approach us, we do not, that doesn't get taken as supporting the application. It must come to the council for consideration.
Yes.
And thank you very much to the speakers. We now go on to the ward member. Councillor McLaren, you've stood down from the committee to be the ward member. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Hope everybody can hear me. Councillor Busby always complains he can't. Sorry, I'm as near as I can, Councillor Beer. In 2020, I made some comments about the application that was going forward at the time, and I will just read out the reasons I gave at that point. None of the proposed housing meets the wider need of Holbrook residents and their families who wish to remain in Holbrook. That we have many local Holbrook families who cannot afford to live in the village because there is a dearth of affordable housing, and we've also got many elderly residents who could downsize but can't, so there's a shortage of single-storey dwellings as well, which means that young people and families have to move away because there is no accommodation they can afford. This is a great loss to a rural community in economic and social terms. This site brings no economic benefit to the larger community because the development is quite small. The fire station, with its proximity to the site, regularly undertakes night drills. Hyams Lane is a one-car width country lane for walkers, children, cyclists, dog walkers and visitors. Very large projects undertaken by Anglian Water in 2020 at the entrance of Hyams Lane for many weeks confirmed the inadequacy of the main highway and Hyams Lane to deal with any increase in traffic, especially heavy traffic. Residents living opposite the proposed site to entrance have to live with vehicles using the space in front of their houses to await oncoming traffic to pass. The potential for accidents remains from the construction of this site and the increased traffic onto the lane and to and from the site by residents. That was the comments I made in 2020. They have not changed. Those have fundamentally not changed. In 2023, we have seen the photographic evidence of the light pollution from the fire station during their regular night drills, which would intrude into the proposed site and affect the residents. I personally use this lane quite frequently, and since the pandemic and the increase of online shopping, the number of delivery vans travelling from Tattingstone to Holbrook across the countryside, merging into Hyams Lane, has increased dramatically. Holbrook as a core village needs young families and older people, and we need to be attracting those groups into our village. Otherwise, they have to move elsewhere. I will mention that Babergh already has a 7.13-year housing supply, so this housing is not needed. As a council, as Babergh District Council, we encourage the development of the neighbourhood plan, and Holbrook have been rewarded for all their hard work and are now in a position that the examiner has recommended that the plan goes to referendum, and the weight has changed in relation to the consideration of this application. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I request that the committee consider the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Any questions? The ward member? Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Mary. I'm a little confused there. You said that we've got a 7.13-year housing supply, therefore the housing isn't needed. But before that, you said that houses were needed in the village, and they were a particular type, which is affordable, small houses for families. I would have thought these two-bedroom properties were exactly that.
Busby, I rather confused the argument. I quite agree. I was just making the point that the district has that land supply, but all of our villages actually are in need of affordable housing and single-storey dwellings, because the population, the demographic of the population is changing. So I'm sorry I confused you.
No? Thank you very much, Councillor McLaren. For debate.
Chair, could I come back on a couple of points?
You may.
Thanks. Just before we start debate. The question was asked about site allocations in the Holbrook Neighbourhood Plan, and unless I'm getting this very wrong, I think the conclusion was that there were no allocations because it's based on the fact there'd already been an over-provision. I'm just going to read you the relevant paragraph from the Holbrook Neighbourhood Plan, which is, hold on, bear with me, lost it of course. So yeah, it's paragraph 3.8 of their plan, but it's actually quoted in our paragraph 3.10, the committee report. And towards the end of that, the last three lines, therefore the parish is not compelled to make any further allocations to meet this target prior to 2037. So my understanding is that there aren't any allocated sites because there is already an over-provision. I stand to be corrected by people shouting at me, but that's my understanding of that.
And what was the other point?
The other point was relating to splays. I've been in touch with Ben Chester from the Highway Authority. So it spun from the discussion about parked cars, etc. Ben goes on to say the adjustment where we compromise is simply moving the splays out from the near side edge into the road, And we base this on the narrow width of the road where, and I quote, the likelihood of cars being completely on the wrong side of the road is minimal or impossible. Also worth noting, the speed survey results are 27.3 miles an hour, and that was based on the speed survey. That's the average speed cars go up there according to this survey. So they wouldn't even need a 43-metre splay. And it's a location where the criteria for reduction from 2.4 to 2-metre setback would be accepted. We compromised slightly because we felt we wouldn't be able to defend an objection on visibility if challenged.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody wants to ask Mark a question of clarification from what he's just said? Councillor Holt, you were up first.
Yeah. On the numbers, is this the number with permissions or the number that have been built?
Yeah, so the number... Sorry, the numbers we're looking at, those said to be required was 58, and the number built, I think, was 69. Built or that have permission, 69.
Permission, not built.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Permission, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
About me? Yeah, no. Mark, could you just confirm, so am I reading then that the neighbourhood plan is actually recommending that no development takes place on the basis that development numbers have been hit up until 2037?
Well, it can't do that because that would be NPPF compliant, but it's got an unless. If you look at the end of HNP01, there's a hook there where it's the fourth paragraph down. I can see you can't. Outside the defined settlement boundaries, proposals for new housing, including conversion, self-build, replacement, will only be permitted where they are in accordance with national and district level policies. So that takes us around to CS11 and need, basically. Go in a bit of a circle and come back to need again.
Right, okay.
Councillor McCraw.
Can I just ask a question of Mark as the area planning manager on a technical matter, in that the recommendation in the paper doesn't include some changes perhaps that should be made to it under this additional correction for the joint local plan. Are we going to be making amendments to the recommendation for refusal?
I think I may have possibly said that at the bottom of the table of papers, but we'll do that. We'll just add a line in and also contrary to.
So that would be specifically referring to emerging policy SPO3 in conjunction with CS11.
Indeed, yes.
Is that correct?
I think we have to do that in passing anyway, because as things progress, as appeals emerge, these matters are going to come to us anyway. So
both those policies address the same issue, don't they? CS11 and SPO3.
Yeah.
And they are in fact equivalent, but one's a little stiffer. The more recent one, SPO3, is a little more rigorous than CS11. Is that right?
I think it is. I think we're going back almost to the lockdown on settlement limits, basically. And we're not there yet, but it is more stringent. CS11 is a more flexible policy, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Busby, have a question for the planning area manager?
It's to do with the neighbourhood plan. Look, this is a document that is top of the weighting in terms of which documents we should give most importance to. Now, I'm confused as to what's in it. Either they have 4 sites allocated, or they haven't. If they haven't, that puts a whole new, different look on the neighbourhood plan than if they do. Before I make any decision, I want to know what is the truth on this neighbourhood plan.
I think the important thing to realise is the examiner found it to be sound, basically. So on the judgment about housing need, the examiner found in favour of what Holbrook were suggesting. So I think that's the shortcut answer to you. The examiner finds in favour.
That's fine, but it says also that in here that there will be windfall sites that will be considered. If you've got 4 sites allocated for future development, then the requirement from windfall is almost eliminated. If you haven't got any sites, then you are going to be dependent on windfall. And according to the figures, they've already had the housing that they're required to have has already been built. Yet there is still a need for certain types of housing. So where's this need going to be fulfilled? Is it from windfall? Is it from the 4 sites that have been supposedly allocated? Or what? We can't make a decision, given this grey area of waiting, without some facts.
There's certainly grey areas, I'll give you that. The case officer wants to say something.
Yeah, so in your reports in 3.10, you have an extract of text from the neighbourhood plan. My reading of that is, the emerging local plan also identified a minimum housing requirement for the parish of 65 new dwellings over the plan period to 2037. This housing requirement is already met as it primarily comprises sites that have the benefit of planning permission and were not implemented at the 1st of April 2018, 58 dwellings. So I suspect what has happened is that the settlement boundary has been redrawn in line with the JLP, what appeared in that document, to include those sites that were previously acceptable under CS11. Had permission, they haven't been implemented. I think that's probably the 4 sites that the parish council are trying to explain that they feel are allocated sites. So they weren't previously within the settlement boundary. The settlement boundary is being redrawn so that planning permission can be applied for again for those sites that were acceptable previously. But maybe the parish council can tell me if that is the right understanding of that or not.
Can you?
I'm not entirely sure if I can, but certainly there was a lot of development in Holbrook since the housing need was identified, and that was met and exceeded. And also there's been 4 houses built since then, and there's also been planning permission granted for 7 more houses in the village. I'm not sure if the settlement boundary has been adapted. Perhaps the planning officer can.
I've got the answer now, sorry.
Thank you.
Manager. Holbrook Neighbourhood Plan, paragraphs 6.12 to 6.14. This can take about 2 minutes to read through, please forgive me. 8 sites were identified in the site assessment. This includes 7 sites within the neighbourhood plan call for sites and 1 from the district council call for sites. 3 of the sites submitted through the neighbourhood plan had already been submitted to Babergh Mid-Suffolk, to the SHELAR, the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. All sites are available as they have all either been submitted to a local authority or a neighbourhood call for sites. This is very waffly. 1 site in Holbrook was included with a revised site boundary, so that answers that. The boundary was, I don't know which site it was, but it was revised. 1 site within the neighbourhood plan area was found to be potentially suitable and available for allocation. This was, however, not for housing, but instead for education. All other sites were rated red by ACOM and therefore deemed unsuitable for residential housing. So we've got 3 sites that came through basically our call for sites by the looks of it. Well, there's 3 sites that made it through basically, and there are no extra sites in the neighbourhood plan. No.
Listen, clarify that, Mark. I thought the neighbourhood plan did have.
Well, there's 3 sites, but they duplicate what was already in our own call for sites. So it depends how you take that. But there are no additional to that, no.
Thank you. Right. Well, let's open the debate. Councillor Busby, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's as clear as mud, quite frankly. I'm almost likely to suggest that we defer this until we can get some actual detail as to what has been built and what was requested to be built. I would like to know from 2018 how many houses have been built and what they were in terms of 2, 3, 4 bedroom houses. how many houses have been approved and not been built in the same 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses, whatever, and what other sites there are available and how many houses they could accommodate. This application depends so much on the neighbourhood plan, because without that neighbourhood plan, I think it sails through. There are so many, the objections seem to have been overcome, and there doesn't seem to be any other reason to refuse it other than it doesn't comply with a neighbourhood plan. And I'm all in favour of neighbourhood plans. And if I was making the decision now, I would support refusal because of the strength of the neighbourhood plan trumps everything else. But if I haven't got confidence in that neighbourhood plan and the numbers, then I can't come up with a decision. So I propose that we defer this until we've actually got the numbers that we need to see what housing has been built, what housing is proposed, and what housing is needed.
Is that a proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. So I have a proposal from Councillor Busby, a proposal from Councillor Barrett, seconded by Councillor Barrett.
May I?
I'm going to let the members speak first. Councillor Hinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading through page 27 of our report, I know there's lots of figures on there, but it seems to identify a fairly definite pattern of housing provision. Paragraph 3.10, merging local plan also identifies a minimum housing requirement for the parish of 65 new dwellings. So there's a requirement in the neighbourhood plan for 65. It then, the page then goes on to say, as mentioned in paragraph 9.3 of the neighbourhood plan, the examiner's report, housing provision in Holbrook from April 2018 to March 2022 now stands at 69 dwellings in total. So that's 4 more than the neighbourhood plan said was required to start off with. It then goes on. Well, if you can have a minimum and a maximum, what's going to happen?
Thank you.
You then go on to say that on paragraph 3.14, an 87-unit development in Holbrook that is close to completion is expected to deliver 15 units of affordable rented housing, 12 shared ownership units. This goes some way to meet the affordable housing need of 31 affordable rented units and 64 affordable sale units over the MP period. So they're nearly at the targets set by the neighbourhood plan before the thing's actually even been adopted. So there is obviously no need.
Sorry, Chair, can I just pick up on that exact point? If you're looking at 3.14, it says an 87-unit development in Holbrook that is close to completion is expected to deliver 15 units of affordable rented housing, but there's 31 affordable rented needed, and 12 shared ownership, and 64 are needed. So it isn't supplying all of the need. In total of housing, yes, it would appear that they've built more than they've needed. But as we've discussed, it's not meeting the housing need. That's the crucial point. There's no point saying, yes, we've built 155 bedroomed houses if they need 40 one-bedroom flats. Because numbers mean nothing.
Some confusion there, Mr. Chairman, because of course earlier on the point that I made about the mentioning a neighbourhood plan examiner's report now stands at 69 dwellings in total. It doesn't say affordable dwellings, affordable to rent or affordable to buy or anything else. It just talks about a total of 69 dwellings. So where this affordable goes some way to meet the affordable housing need of 31 affordable rented and 64 affordable sale units, where that figure has actually come from, I'm not quite sure.
Hence my...
Let's see if I can clarify that with the area planning manager.
Sorry, what actually is the question, Chair?
If you wanted as a straight question, where does the figure in paragraph 3.14 of the report, which says that there is a requirement for 64 affordable sale units and 31 affordable rented units over the neighbourhood plan period, actually come from?
I'd have to route around to give you an answer to that, Chair. So,
okay, please. Councillor Barrett.
I'd just like to remind everyone here that it is a minimum requirement. There is no upper limit. It's a minimum requirement, and it is for quite a long period of time. So I don't, it's a minimum housing requirement. There's no maximum that's applied. So where does this sort of come in that we have a ceiling? Because there is no ceiling, it's a minimum requirement. Because if you actually put a ceiling on that within the neighbourhood plan, then it would get kicked out.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Can we have a 5-minute break while Mark finds the answer out, please?
How close are you?
What should we have a vote on?
Let's carry on with the discussion while he does that. Well, no, I have it on the table. I don't have to take the vote yet, because I suspect that this time if I do, you'll lose. But I think we'll allow... Yes, you can.
Thanks, Chair. I think there are a lot of red herrings flying around in this chamber today. We've heard a lot of discussion about the highways issues on Hyams Lane. I accept that's been a concern, but it's not actually part of the argument for refusal on this case. That has, whether right or wrong, has been put to one side by officer advice. I would just like to say I'm inclined in the whole of this to support the policies. Now, the whole point of supporting these policies, and again, another red herring, previous applications did not have the JLP carrying the same weight. They did not have the Holbrook neighbourhood plan carrying the same weight as they do now. We have increased weight, and I'm inclined to support policy because there are some quite specific reasons why recommendation is given, particularly in policies HNP01 and HNP02, and the fact that our own JLP SP03 seems to strengthen CS11. So there are specific reasons that actually describe the recommendation in a way that can be consistent with the NPPF and with our own policies. And every time we make a decision, we've got to bear in mind that we may be required to defend that position. So if we're going to defend a position, we need to have a good policy basis, not vague instances. Let's take another red herring that keeps coming up. The requirement for having site allocations. There is no requirement in a neighbourhood plan to actually have site allocations any longer. It was at one time perhaps thought to be so, but it isn't any longer, and I think a number of neighbourhood plans are coming forward without any allocations. Now, in this instance, we've got an allocation for a community that has been met, possibly exceeded, and yes, it's quite right, it can be exceeded. But if we're going to talk about the arguments presented to us today, I asked, do we have enough information to make a decision? And I believe we do, without getting, if you don't mind my saying, sidetracked in some of these red herrings. And I take the point made. I think there are some issues, but I don't think they're as important or relevant. I think we have the information we need to make a sound decision. And that's probably the way I shall vote.
So members, the vote for a deferral is now in progress. Councillor Beer, can I take your vote, please?
For the deferment.
Thank you. So, Chair, that's 5 votes against a deferral and 5 votes for a deferral. Can I please ask for your casting vote?
My casting vote is
Yeah,
against...
before you say that, could I just say that the
No, you mustn't.
The deferment could be after this next application. It might only be an hour.
I'm sorry, we've taken the vote. The next step is I have to make a casting vote, and I'm against the deferral. Let's move on. Let's push
Thank you,
forward.
Chair.
And Councillor Hinton, would you like to continue?
We've gone round and round in circles a little bit on this one, but I would like to try and speed things along a bit by proposing the officer's recommendations as set out in the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. Councillor McCraw, are you seconding?
I'd like to second.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I just need to add in the line about the reference to the JLP in the reason for refusal.
Okay. Fine with that, added to it. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, I don't feel in a position to be able to really consider this matter. I think we're lacking in evidence. I think we're lacking in answers to questions. And I'm very concerned that we're going down this road. As members, we should be presented with everything that we need. And I don't feel in this instance we have been. And I think it's very concerning going forward.
Thank you. Any more comments? Then I'll ask the area manager to sum up what this motion exactly is.
Yes, I think I've got an answer to that. Affordable, the reference to 64, well that says 65 here. Babergh is yet to publish a revised part 2 of the emerging JLP or to publish any revised supporting documentation. This is from the examiner. I recognise the figure of a minimum of 65 dwellings does not address the affordable housing need identified in the Holbrook Parish Housing Needs Assessment. However, 65 is a minimum figure, and that's talking about affordable. So that's where that reference comes from, just to clear up that confusion. I'd hope at this point there's nothing else that hasn't been answered, but I'm happy to, before we move, I think we're in the wrong place. Now we're in the vote, aren't we? Right, okay.
You're into the motion.
So, motion is as per the, as per the report, with the addition of reference to JLP policy SPO3. I think Councillor McCraw wants to say something.
One moment. Councillor.
No,
Councillor
sorry.
Barrett.
I mean, I think we need to go to the vote on this, but I do find it rather worrying that the application, listening to the applicants who were under the impression 2 weeks ago that this application was getting approval, the joint local plan and then the neighbourhood plan have come into play, which has turned that on its head, and quite honestly, the information in the neighbourhood plan, which is not actually voted for and could get turned down, is basically deciding this vote. I think I think the advice or the officer's recommendation is flawed on the basis of that, because this is not a document that has been adopted. It could be turned down at referendum by the council, and we've seen clearly that there is an alternative view in Holbrook because we've got a supporter of that plan. I do think it's very dangerous, and as you know, as I second Councillor Busby's proposal to defer it, I think we are on very thin ground here, and I think if it went to an appeal, I think they'd probably get it. So, because I think it's not a good decision if we go with the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I would remind you that we have a procedure now of how we take things on the basis of them emerging, as for the JLP and the neighbourhood plan. Councillor Beer, you wanted to ask?
Yes, I just want to ask the question. The recommendation on page 44, when the slide was up, slide 25, it said recommendation for refusal was specific on a particular issue. I'm assuming...
Housing needs.
Yeah, I know it was housing need. I'm assuming that the page 44, this is all the ingredients to that. But you're saying reasons here. I was under the impression there was just one specific reason, not reasons. And I think it is important, because if these people have to go to appeal, they need to know whether they're appealing on all these reasonings that you've got in the page 44, or on the specific. Could you put slide 25 back up?
Chair, we can save time. It's what's in the it's at the bottom of the committee report. That is the recommendation. I think that was an attempt at having a summary of what the points were, but they're all wedded into that one long paragraph at the bottom of the committee report on page.
I hear what you're saying,
44.
but I did ask the question right at the beginning on slide 25. What was the specific reason? If you can perhaps put that up again. That's my argument, that if this is refused, which it may be or may not be, the applicant needs to know what they've got to argue on. And page 44 showed lots of reasons. And it was there.
Thank you, Councillor Beer.
Local, oh, let me put my glasses on because that might help me. That won't. Local identified need. Pacific.
Yeah, one moment, please. There.
Councillor, if I may, the presentation is a summary of the details contained in the report. The vote that is included here is the recommendation based in the report, and a decision notice will be issued which will give the full details of the reason for refusal, if that is the way it goes. So this supports the report, but all of the actual, what we're voting on, is contained in the report and not the presentation. Thank you. Yes, so this is the reason for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Holt.
Yeah, would the proposer and seconder consider an amendment in that this particular item is refused purely on CS11 due to the fact that HNP01 and HNP02 that's referred to in the officer refusal has been clearly, the waters of it have been muddied, in my opinion, and I think of several members' opinions, and that I don't really see that it would be useful to have those in there if there are concerns about the clarity of those policies, because we're questioning the evidence and also the numbers involved, and I just feel that it would be easier possibly to have them removed.
Do you? No? No. So we go to the vote.
The inspector's looked at the report and has made his recommendations, and these assumptions are based on that.
Okay. We will go. Thank you. You agree as the second?
I'm just going to say I agree entirely. We support HNP01 and HNP02, and I see no reason to weaken the reason for refusal.
Okay. We will go to the vote. What's Councillor Busby?
Well, can I just say that the problem I face is that I don't agree with refusal. I don't agree with making the decision because I feel that the information isn't there. Therefore, but I can't vote for the application because I'm still not sure of the information. Therefore, the only alternative for me is to abstain, and I will abstain because the information isn't available to make the right decision, in my view.
If I may, Chairman, don't want to add too much, but if members are can do what they like, obviously, including abstaining, but a resolution is a resolution to do what it says, which in this case would be to refuse. I mean, I think people who are unfamiliar with our committee sometimes assume that means we do the opposite. It doesn't. You know, the opposite of refusal isn't necessarily acceptance. It may be something else.
Thank you.
So Chair, those are the words. I mean, I suppose we should just briefly mention CS2 as well, as that's our main spatial policy, plus the JLP policies.
You happy with that?
That's the only amendment I suggest.
You want?
Could the officer just expand a little on that? I think we'd both like.
It's simply because it's not within a built-up area boundary, so that's the beginning of our local policy. I mean, CS2 is undermined by various case law, but it's outside the settlement limit, so we may as well just include that as well.
I think it's superseded by the more recent neighbourhood plan, but I can accept your point.
As you know, we're juggling.
Okay, if we're
so
juggling.
We'll have CS2 and we'll have the
you don't think this weakens the reason for refusal in any way, since CS2 itself has been challenged in part?
It's just at the beginning point of how we have, we've allocated this, it's outside that, therefore, and then we go into the real nuts and bolts of the arguments, which are CS11 and JLP based.
CS11 as opposed to SPO3. Yeah, okay. Are you happy with that, John?
Happy with that? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, have the vote set up? We will now move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is in progress for you. Councillor Beer, can I take the vote, please?
Against the refusal. Thank you.
Come on.
Thank you, Chair. So that's 6 votes for refusal and 4 votes against refusal. That application is refused.
Applications refused. Thank you. Charge your coffee. If I say 10, Okay, everyone, please, let's make a start. This is planning application DC 22-01605, Hill Farm Barns, Hill Farm, Old London Road, Copdock and Washbrook. Councillor Busby, are you staying on the committee or stepping down to be a ward member?
Yeah, I'll stay on the committee. I don't think this is a controversial item.
It's not whether it's controversial, it's whether you feel comfortable that you're not.
So I just wanted to get that in to set the ground rules.
Oh, thank you. I know his wife's not been too well, so. I know a member of his family's not been too well. Announced he was staying on committee. I will now invite the case officer, Elizabeth Flood, to introduce the application to the committee. Elizabeth, thank you.
So this is an application for outline planning permission with access to be considered at this point for demolition of existing redundant farm buildings and erection of up to 19 dwellings with a new access off the Malverns. As with the previous application, it's, as set out in your late papers, the Copdock and Washbrook neighbourhood plan has now got some weight. Less weight than the Holbrook one, because this has just got to Reg 14, but it has some weight. You may remember that the Copdock and Washbrook neighbourhood plan failed at referendum. This is a new version, so they've started again, and so this is at stage, Reg 14 stage. The JLP also has some weight, particularly in this case, policy SPO3 and the policies within the neighbourhood plan would not support the development because it's outside the settlement boundary. However, in this case, under the existing plan, the local plan, we consider it is generally compliant with CS11 and compliant with CS2 in relation to the considerations, and also the material considerations outside of the policies would in this case support the application. It's quite rare that we get them that are like this, where we say there are other material considerations that have such weight that we could maybe put our policies aside, but in this case we consider that there is, and we'll explain about that in the report, So this is the site. You can see that it's basically split into two parts. There's the field, and so this part is a small agricultural field, and then above it is the buildings and the and sort of this is a derelict area with the burnt out buildings, the farmhouse and the overgrown land, and then this part is development. You can see the Malverns down here. This is Old London Road or London Road. It seems to be sort of interchangeable what it's called. Goes up here, and then it's a gate there, and then it's all pedestrian. And you'll remember this because we went to the site visit. You go under here, and then you get into Copdock interchange and to the Park and Ride and Tesco and so on. And the built-up area boundary is actually here, down here. And so all this is currently outside the built-up area boundary, but within the new Copdock and Washbrook neighbourhood plan, this area would have a settlement boundary. So again, you can see the application site here. You can see the existing buildings, and you'll notice that the applicant, which is Suffolk County Council, own this field as well, so they own a wider part of the land. Constraints. So key constraints are built-up area boundary, which is down here. You can see the flood zone, so this would sort of prevent any development adjacent to the settlement boundary in this case, which is why the Malverns were developed here originally as a rural exception site. You can also see that it's all within a special landscape area. And what it doesn't show on here, but it will show in another constraint, another map, is that there are 4 TPO trees on or close to the site. So here, this shows, this is the parameters plan. So this would be a plan that if you were to support the development, we would include this as one of the plans, and this would show where development wouldn't be acceptable. So you can see the 4 TPO trees with their root protection zone. So this would prevent any development coming forward on those areas. And it also shows the area that is of risk of surface water flooding. And again, this parameters plan would not support any development on that area. You can also see the access onto the Malverns. This is an indicative layout only, so this is all indicative apart from the access. So you can see that the access would be up here from the Malverns, and then you'd have your 19 dwellings set out here. The attenuation basin would be located in this area, which is the lowest area of land. The land slopes down this way and this way. You can see the flood zone, which no development would happen in. You can see that this tree is protected as in within public open space. Again, there's a small area of public open space here to protect this tree, and then this tree would be kept within it's sort of on the boundary, so it would come into the gardens of these 2 properties, but they've got quite big plots. So it's a lot of this design has been designed around keep protecting those trees and ensuring that they wouldn't have pressure to fell them in the future. This area, you can see that the landscaping would retain along London Road and along the Malverns as much as possible, and some additional landscaping at the rear and at the side. Again, as a sloping site, so you can see on the indicative site section that there would need to be some infill and some digging. And we'd probably look at putting a levels condition on any reserved matters. And again, it doesn't show it on this section, but there would need to be some works to get the access in. So this is the key component of this application. So by putting the access here, it means that we can stop the access up here, the existing access from into the Hill Farm Barns, which means that this part of the road can be stopped up from vehicular traffic. So there would be 2 bollards here and 2 bollards here and some building out here. And then we would look, it's not quite been clarified what can be done, but we would look to get some signage here. So this would then become 2-way. This part of the carriageway only accesses 1 dwelling, White Cottage, in this location. But we can't close this up because these residents need to be able to access their garage and parking areas. So this would become 2-way. We're hoping that we can get some signage up to say access to White Cottage only, but it wouldn't prevent other vehicles using it, but it would hopefully dissuade other vehicles from using it, and then we'd be looking at some bollards at the top to stop people driving all the way around. So at the moment, there are footways within Washbrook and in Copdock, and they sort of finish here. So people, in order to get to the rest of the pedestrian walkway, which is up here, they have to walk along the road. And it is lightly trafficked, but it's non-restricted. So in theory, cars could go at 60 mile an hour up here and go round. So it is considered that this is a really good proposal in terms of the sustainability of the village, because it will encourage more people to walk along here, and then this gets you into Tesco, to the bus stops and so on. So it's really good for the sustainability of the village. So here are some photos. You probably remember this from site, but the access would be just up here, just once you get into the Malverns. Like I say, there would have to be some profiling of the access, and some of this landscape would be lost. This is the existing footway into, existing vehicular access into the site. So this would become a pedestrian and cycle access, and then the dwellings would be here. This is a category B tree, which on the indicative layout is shown to be removed, but we would look at reserve matters about whether that could be retained. Again, this is looking back, so that's the access onto London Road. These are the two TPO trees. This is the other tree, and this is within the site. Again, you can see the two TPO trees. You can see that there's quite a lot of fly tipping and so on at the moment. It's a bit of a mess. That's the existing dwelling that would be removed. It is used by bats a little bit, so they would require a bat license before they demolish the building. But ecology aren't concerned, provided they get their bat license. Again, these are some more of the burnt out buildings, burnt out cars. This is looking back onto the site, so you can see the burnt out buildings. This would be sort of the end of the site here. This is the other part of the site, so the field. So the Malverns, you can just see it down there. And these are the other two TPO trees. So this would be developed for housing. Okay, again, this is looking into the sort of agricultural field part of the site. You can see the landscaping there for the Malverns. Some of that on this end would be lost to get the access up, but the rest would be retained. And that's quite important, because these houses are sort of going to be above the ones in the Malverns. Again, similar view. You can see the farmhouse, and these pine trees would be removed. And this just gives you an idea of the sort of character around. So that's the Malverns, and this is the slope, and this is the landscaping that would be retained. Again, this is looking down from the site down to the Malverns. So you can see there will be quite a difference in levels, but they are physically separated. Okay, and these are showing you what would happen on London Road. So this is the access to the Malverns. This would be where it would be built out and the bollards would be put on. So all this would then become a pedestrian and cycleway. Again, this is looking at it from White Cottage. So this is White Cottage. This would become two-way, and the bollards would be on this side. And then this is right at the end, so that's the access. So the other bollards would just be put up here. And it's hoped that we can get some landscaping of this verge as well, so some trees planted ideally. And this shows just the last bit, which is the entrance into the rest of the pedestrian bit of the road. And finally, this is a picture from Swan Hill. So it is a special landscape area, but the only place the development will be really visible from is this going down this road. And you can just see the Malverns there. So what the applicant has agreed is that they will put a hedge. This is all in their ownership. It's all Suffolk County Council's. So they will put a hedge with some trees on this corner here, and that will help filter the views of the development, which would be sort of here, and it will also help to filter the existing views of the Malverns. So the recommendation is, as set out in your report, is one of approval due to either the material considerations and CS2 in terms of exceptional circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Waiting for the light to come up so we can see anybody. Councillor Beer.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I don't know if I need to declare an interest that I'm a member of Suffolk County Council and on Suffolk County Council's Planning Committee, but I've never discussed this site with any of my colleagues there or what have you, but I thought I ought to just point that out to you. I don't know what the legal situation is.
I don't think that compromises Councillor Beer's position.
I've been on the site inspection with Babergh on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Elizabeth, when we did the site inspection visit, when we were in the Morvens, there was a lot of water coming down from that site. Probably we chose a bad day, but there was a lot of water. Have we got enough in place to prevent that within the conditions?
So we would look to put on a SUDS condition for the surface water within the site. So that would prevent, that should deal with the drainage within the site. And then in terms of the access road, we would look to put in a drain or something at the bottom of the access road to stop it draining into the Malverns.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor McCraw.
Elizabeth, thanks for that. It's about the access at the top of the former London Road, the A12. Will the proposals with bollards and everything else allow retention of the current cycle access under the A12 and into the sort of Ipswich network of cycle routes?
Yes, so the bollards are only there to prevent vehicles, so they will be wide enough that cycles can get through, and then it will provide a cycle, because eventually there is a hope that it will all be cycle way all the way from Capel or along the road to Copdock. So this will be the sort of first 80 metres of that cycle route.
You kept saying pedestrian, and I wanted to establish that it is actually cycle access, and I think it's also part of a designated scheme for our own cycle strategy within Suffolk's framework.
Yeah, it will be cycle and pedestrian. They won't be segregated in any way because the width of the road is considered wide enough that there shouldn't be any...
Shared use, thanks.
Councillor Hinton.
Thank you. Yes, just a quick question concerning the size of the site. 19 homes, looking at the visual presentations, etc., compared to the Malverns, it seems like extremely dense housing stuck on the outside of that area. So what is the size of the house? What is the density of housing on the site?
I don't know what the density is. I think the Malverns is 18 or 20 dwellings, so it's a similar size, but the Malverns does include some flats, so although it looks less dense, it is a similar number of actual dwellings.
Councillor Holt.
Yeah, obviously this is an outline, and one of the major things we have to look at is access. And I'm a little bit concerned that we haven't got detail. Officer's presentation has included this might happen, that might happen on the old section of the A12. It's all to do with the access and of the objections raised online. Certainly all the objections were to do with the roads and the access points and the traffic. The bollards not preventing motorbikes, etc., using that particular section. So I'm a little bit disappointed we haven't got more detail and accuracy in what is proposed. It's being left, again, for us not to be able to vote on anything other than purely access to the site. The road alterations, I think, are key to this, certainly for locals, by the sound of it, and yet we haven't got the detail, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. Another thing I'd like to raise is the 4 trees, if I may, Chair.
Can we get that one done?
Yep.
We can get that answer first.
So the highway improvements, as shown on the plan, so basically the 2 sets of bollards and the building out to those bollards would be confirmed and would be as part of a condition that they had to do those. The 2 things that haven't yet been clarified is what signage can be put up in terms of access signage to the White Cottage. So whether we can ask for a sign that says access only to White Cottage, and what, if any landscaping would happen on those verge. So the fundamental issue of shutting that road to vehicles would be part of this application, so it would include a condition. But there are 2 question marks at the moment, one on signage and one on landscaping.
Yeah, well, certainly access to White Cottage, which was one in particular I was interested in because we just don't seem to have clarity on that. The other thing was the 4 trees, can we guarantee their protection? As in, we have schemes on outline, but when detail comes in, the plans change and then they're suddenly gone. So can we at this stage guarantee them, or is it our aspiration to keep them?
Those are all TPO trees, so they are protected, and as long as they remain healthy, they will be protected. But what we would, if you were to approve this application, we would include that parameters plan that shows retention of the 4 trees and their root protection zones. So whatever came in could not develop on those sites, and again, the flood area.
No. Thank you, Elizabeth. We'll move on to the only public speaker we have is Mr. Michael Calder. You're speaking as the agent. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Am I on? Good morning. I'm from Phase 2 Planning, and I've been asked to address this committee on behalf of the Corporate Property Division of Suffolk County Council. The proposals before you are the result of extensive consultation and guidance from your officers, developed over the last 2 years and considered extensively by all relevant consultees. We hope that you will take comfort in your officer's recommendation for approval, which is supported by no objections from any statutory consultees and is supported by the Parish Council. One of the many benefits of this proposal is that it will promote sustainable travel and improve highway safety through measures that will prioritise safe pedestrian and cycle access between the villages of Copdock and Washbrook and the facilities at the Copdock interchange, which are within 500 metres of the site. A scheme for highway off-site works is submitted with the application. It's available on the website and for your decision today. The local transport enhancements will provide residents that wish to access key services with a genuine choice of transport options other than using the car, because it will be quicker to walk and cycle to these facilities than drive. Such initiatives are consistent with the objective of the MPPF to maximise sustainable transport solutions in new development. These measures will also benefit existing residents of Copdock and Washbrook and is considered to be a significant local benefit from this proposal. We therefore agree with your officers that this benefit provides exceptional circumstances required by the adopted local plan. Your officers have also confirmed that there is a proven local need for housing in the village, and in the absence of a neighbourhood plan and delays with the adoption of a new local plan, there are no current allocations to provide this need. However, as confirmed by officers, this site is considered an appropriate location to meet these unmet local housing needs. Again, we agree with officers that meeting these local needs supports approval of this application. In addition, the proposals will provide 6 new affordable homes alongside a contribution, again providing much needed affordable housing for those with the greatest need. Neighbouring residents have acknowledged that the proposal will result in local transport improvements, but some have expressed a desire for further measures. The applicant has gone as far as is reasonably proportionate to the development to address existing conditions, and it shall be for the Highway Authority to investigate the neighbours' requests as part of a broader review outside the scope of this application. The Parish Council recognises that there are local benefits, such as enhancing a site resembling dereliction and providing a use that will remove ongoing antisocial behaviour and fly tipping from the site. These matters are a local concern. There are therefore a number of clear benefits from this proposal, and we support your officer's conclusion that any impacts are minor and do not outweigh those clear benefits. With planning conditions and completion of a Section 106 agreement, officers support this proposal, and we therefore urge you to follow your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the agent? Councillor Hinton.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I'm sure as you're representing the County Council, who are the local highways authority, and they've obviously been in consultation with highways, National Highways, sorry, they keep changing their name, I forget what they're called this week, National Highways over the improvements to the Copdock Mill interchange, which will obviously come very close to this site and will probably impact upon it. Have those been taken into consideration with your proposals, or are you waiting until you've got permission and then you'll try and sort out the problems afterwards?
No, so they have been considered. I think within the officer's report it shows you that the National Highways were a consultee on this application to the authority as well. So yeah, there has been involvement. They have made comments to the application and it's been brought into account in the decision making.
Any more questions? Councillor Holt.
Draw your attention to what I said to the officer actually about the highways concerns, re White's Cottage and the access to it. And obviously there's been some comments in the objections about youngsters using it for gatherings and HGV parkings. And if you're going to restrict half of the road and block it off, aren't we just encouraging that to be transferred right in front of White's Cottage instead of necessarily the opposite side? So would you consider going forward some restrictions, whether it be HGV restrictions or other ways of controlling what vehicular access can go to and beyond White's Cottage? So I think that is a bit of an issue in that it's a known problem at the moment, by the sounds of it. It's a once opportunity to make sure if this development gets approval, you could control and negate what is happening there now and not reoccur right in front of a landowner's property.
Yeah, thank you. So there are a number of measures already proposed. There's a proposed off-site London Road cycle scheme plan as part of this application that you might have seen. It's been produced by the highway consultants. And on that, there's a number of measures showing signage and road markings that are proposed outside of the property you're referring to. And that's a preliminary step, we think, in terms of measures that can be taken. And of course, we're quite restricted in terms of what's fair and proportionate and meets the SIL regulations that we can do with this application. So we've tried to match that with optimising what we can do. And I think if this was to go forward, it then certainly continues that discussion for that broader review that continues to take place. And there are opportunities outside of this application for traffic regulation orders to put signage up, make changes to that side of the highway. Hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
I guess I know what the answer's going to be before I ask it, but...
So why ask it?
Oh, thank you. For the same subject, really, in terms of the amendments to the road, I accept that this development shouldn't necessarily pay to solve all of the ills of that particular area. However, it could go a long way to contribute to solving many of them. It's difficult to tell at this point what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think the residents would accept that it seems okay so far, but what happens if it doesn't work or it causes more problems? Could there be a fund put aside, I don't know, 50,000 quid say, for highways to work with the residents to resolve issues that arise in the future, rather than try and solve them all at this point in time?
You said you knew my answer. So the answer is very similar to the first, in the sense that I can see the practical advantages of that. I think that the local planning authority and the applicant is quite constrained by working within the SIL regulations around not going too far beyond what is considered to be offsetting your own impacts and not trying to address pre-existing conditions that are not of your making. So there is this balance that we're trying to get the right side of our way through. But how that then plays out is that going forward, as the highway authority, there are those other measures and funds available to them to certainly address existing or subsequent highway issues. So I think that should something occur or should things outside this application continue, there are other means and measures for the highway authority to deal with that outside of this application.
Thank you.
I hear what you say.
Yeah.
With all due respect to highways, we know it's like trying to squeeze blood out of a stone to get money to do changes. If we could look at slide 8, I could just explain something which isn't covered at the moment, but could be an issue in the future, which is a result of this development. If we get slide 8 up. It's always at the opposite end to where you've got it, isn't it? Okay. At the moment, you see, for those that don't know the area, the road on the bottom left, Chapel Lane, is where most of the traffic goes. It comes down Old London Road and then turns left at the bottom and then goes up Swallows Hill. Equally, in the reverse, it comes down Swallows Hill, along Chapel Lane, and then, no, not that one, that's the Marvins, the bottom one, and it turns right there. But it comes, in theory, it's supposed to give way. In theory, in practice, nobody does. They come straight out of there because there's no traffic on the Old London Road. Why should there be? And turn straight up the road. Now, we've already got the development at it's called the Marvins, by the way, not Malvins. The Marvins, which has got a certain number of houses, and you've got another development here. That will increase the number of vehicles that will come down Old London Road and go straight up. And they could meet traffic that think they've got the right of way coming out of that turning. Now, Highways have said there's no need for a sign, a stop sign, on either of those. Now, that's their call at the moment. It might be that after we've had 2 or 3 serious accidents, they change their mind. Will there be the money for it? That's the kind of change I think we ought to put money aside for to see whether the changes occur.
Is that the question you're asking?
Well, that's, yes.
Well, can we get an answer to that, and then you can answer your next one?
So I don't have the authority right here, right now, to make any commitments towards doing anything beyond what's currently in the application. And of course, for the very reasons you've said, that it's not been identified as a requirement for us to do those things. Again, I totally accept the practicality of the points that you're making. Certainly, there is a recommendation for a Section 106 obligation to be entered into by the applicant if planning permission is granted. And there are a number of planning conditions that's been recommended by the Highway Authority. So there is, of course, an opportunity for this committee to vote on a recommendation to include something within those obligations that aren't currently written in the report. But as I say, I don't have the authority to accept anything beyond the report, because that again brings us back to what the applicant's been asked to do.
Can I ask that, Chair? Since this is a recommendation on access and outline planning, access to me implies the bit through the Marvins. It doesn't include all of the necessary other changes that we're talking about to highways. Will that be part of the full application? And will we have a chance, therefore, to put in conditions at that point?
So, if I can come in, it would be a condition. So that drawing of slide 8 would be one of the conditions on this outline application. So we would put a condition on that, that either prior to development or at some point, those works would have to be done. We'd have to put it on this outline, not on the reserved matters, because it is a fundamental part of this application. So we wouldn't be looking at those changes again at reserved matters. They don't require planning permission because they're works to the highway, but they need to be included as a condition of this application, because that's the only reason why we would support this application.
In that case, Chair, can I ask also that at the moment there is a de-restricted road speed sign at the bottom, if you go back to slide 8, sorry. You see the red dot at the bottom of that slide. Yeah, you just moved it. There is a de-restriction speed sign. So once you get over that crossing, you can, in theory, do 60 miles an hour. Bearing in mind you've only got about 30 or 40 yards to do it, it doesn't seem to have any sense at all to keep it as 60 miles an hour. Can that be sliced off and left for being 40, which is the rest of the speed limit?
I've spoken to Highway Authority about this, and they have suggested, I mean, a TRO does cost about £10,000, that's what we usually ask for as a contribution. They have said they have spoken to their TRO officer, and they don't believe it is necessary for that small area. What they have asked for as part of this application is they have confirmed that the Malverns, I'll say right, should in theory be a 30-mile-an-hour zone, but there is no signage. So what they have asked as part of this application is 30-mile-an-hour signs here. That wouldn't require the entrance to the Malverns, and that wouldn't require a TRO, and then that would cover both the new development and the Malverns.
But that still leaves a 60-mile-an-hour sign at the bottom of the road, which means that you're doing 60 for 20 yards. I mean, look, it does not cost £10,000 for a tin of black paint or a chainsaw.
Thank you, Councillor Busby, for your explicit way to overcome a problem. But I believe the answer is that they would need to do a TRO to get a change from the 60. Is that correct? So you're stuck with it. Councillor Hinton.
Sorry, this is not a question for the applicant. I don't know whether we finished with the applicant now or not.
Okay. Let's see. Are there any more questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a point here. If you look at page 62, recommendations, brackets 2, the last but one bullet point, as recommended by Highway Authority, including off-site improvements to London Road and 30-mile-an-hour signage for the Malverns, whatever. To those hills in the West Country. Can't we put something in there which requires them? County Council are going to make money out of this site if it costs them £10,000 for TRO, so it comes off their bottom line for the development. Let's make sure that it is safe for people to use. When they start work on the Copdock Mill interchange, sometime in about 2040, I think, is probably the latest estimate, the traffic down the old London Road and going up round there is going to increase exponentially. So it's going to become a real safety hazard. And if it's just the only opportunity we've got to put some sort of restriction on there or some sort of control on there, then let's do it. Let's put it on there.
I'll ask him. Elizabeth, do you?
Let's see whether Elizabeth's got anything.
I'll get Mark to ask. Mark, please.
So are you asking for works which the Highway Authority itself has said has not asked to be done in their consultation response?
Yes, because we think they're taking a shortcut, cheap way out.
Okay. I mean, in answer to your question, theoretically, yes, you can ask for that. I don't know whether Ian wants to chip in there. You okay? Yeah. Yes, you can ask for it, but you have to justify it, really.
Councillor McElroy, you want to make a comment?
Would the final decision not fall to the Highways Authority, who are the people that we are asking to do this? So basically, we're asking them to be judge and jury on their own decisions. So,
different hats are being worn.
no, I appreciate the difficulty. I mean, I'm not sure who gets £10,000 for a TRO, whether it pays for lawyers or whether it pays for the Highway Authority. But I mean, I think we want to have some condition in there regarding all these general points, and I think the officers have already suggested that the discussions have taken place on that. Is it possible to include a condition that the thoughts of the meeting, such as Councillor Busby has presented and Councillor Hinton, that there are concerns about this speed limit things, and but I'm very much aware that the people we're asking to carry the work out and make the decision are the people that we're putting the condition on. And it's a very peculiar situation. But I think we've got to at least put that condition in. And would that, in officers' opinions, cover the circumstances the members have been describing?
I think if you were asking for that, we'd probably go to put it in the 106 as is TRO rather than the condition. If members feel it's necessary to make the scheme safe in highways terms, obviously the Highway Authority itself hasn't said that, but if you feel it is, you can ask for it.
We're the local planning authority, and we can make conditions regarding section
We can, as long as they're reasonable.
Well, I think they are reasonable, and I think the mood of the committee is probably going to be that they are.
Let's establish that. Would most people be in favour of that? I think that would be... I won't bother to take it to a vote at this stage.
I don't think we're going to resolve it today.
No, we're not resolve it today.
Can I just clarify that, so you're talking about a short stretch of road which would still have a 60-mile-an-hour sign on it, you'd not have to have a 30-mile. Is that the signage you're talking about?
I think that would be a simple summary, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, I think it also needs some road markings to show who's got priority.
One thing at a time. One thing at a time, please, gentlemen. So, number one, we are talking about you want a TRO to change the speed limit, or what you want the speed limit changed. However, yes,
just the sign removed,
and some signage. Well, you're actually just taking a sign.
Yeah, well, let's settle the one thing first. Okay, we'll settle that. Then you're saying you want signage on that junction to improve the road safety there. Yep. So we have two matters.
Is that clear, Elizabeth, what that means to you? Do you need clarification?
Ian, are you happy
Elizabeth,
with that?
sorry. Is that, knowing the site as you do, is that clear what's being asked there?
I think what you could do is ask, as part of the 106, for a contribution towards a TRO, which would cover speed limits and potential other traffic improvements. It has to be said, and I think it's probably unlikely in this, but the TROs aren't guaranteed. So people can, object, and those objections can be held.
And that would include, Chair, where the traffic flows are likely to meet, as is described at that junction, because it is a right-hand turn, and of course, not only is it a right-hand turn coming one way or left-hand the other way, but if it's the right-hand turn, you have to cross a line of traffic where the road used to go, and then cross to the other carriageway on the opposite side, because the road is split right down the middle.
Yep.
And that makes it even more difficult, I'd suggest.
Let's, Elizabeth, does it necessarily have to have the words TRO in your S106 condition? Or is it just traffic improvement?
For the speed limits, it would need a TRO, and that comes with a cost. And we generally ask, when we need a TRO, we generally ask for those costs to be covered by the applicant. The applicant isn't usually the Highway Authority, but I think it might be the easiest thing to ask for that contribution.
Sorry, Chair, can we put slide 8 back up again?
Hang on,
because I just want to explain. Elizabeth, you said that there's a proposal to put a 30-mile-an-hour sign at the entrance to the Marvins. There. Well, that's going to require a TRO anyway, because at the moment that's 60 miles an hour.
The Marvins itself it hasn't got a speed limit. It hasn't got a speed limit sign, but what the Highway Authority have told me is because it is got no other signs and because it's got street lamps, strictly it is 30, but it's just not very clear. So they can put up a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit sign at the entrance to this just to make it clearer, but that wouldn't need a TRO because it is technically 30. But this area is de-restricted, it's not 30. So if you wanted to have this area at 30 miles an hour or any of this, or 40 or whatever you were proposing, that would require a TRO because it would legally need to change that speed limit.
So there we have it, folks. We're going to go to all the trouble and cost of putting a 30-mile-an-hour sign up to the entrance of a road where nobody ever does more than 20 miles an hour anyway. Yet we can't be bothered to put a sign up for a piece of road where they're currently allowed to do 60. I mean, that's just bonkers, isn't it? But I accept, I think, what Alistair says. I think we should put something in there to cover for you.
Chair, just to clarify, the TRO, obviously, I think one of the members already said this, it's not a given. there's a public consultation process. It could be that a third party objects and holds that up. So I think any resolution there has to be an open end to it so that we can do something else if the TRO isn't achieved.
Mr Chairman, they can take up to 2 years to get them. They have to consult with all the residents there, but there is a procedure, and the likelihood is that it would get through eventually.
Okay, but what the planning officer is asking for is something a bit open-ended, so if it doesn't happen first time round, it doesn't close. So we carry on with the 3. And as it's the county itself, there might be more reason to settle that.
The local county councillor of that area can actually back this, and that will get through a lot quicker.
Do you know who the county councillor is?
It's Chris Hudson.
Okay, thank you. So, are we happy with that? A 106 condition?
We can start with that, but we can't guarantee the TRO.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll have to, I don't know, we can come back if we can't get the TRO, or you can delegate us to sort it out. What do you want to do?
Delegate you to sort it out. Yes?
Yeah.
And we'll add that to the motion. Okay.
Okay. I mean, if the TRO doesn't go through, then we
worry about that.
We can't then make it 30 miles an hour. We just don't have control to do that.
Let's ask for it and see.
Yep. Okay.
Trying. We're very trying. Thank you, Mark. Can I get this? Thank you. Are there...
Chair, in that case, can I move that we go to the vote, and I propose that we accept the officer's recommendations?
Okay, and we have a second, Councillor Beer. Councillor Holt, you wanted to make a comment before we...
I just want to add, HGV, ban them, get a sign up. It's mentioned in the papers, it's been mentioned by objectors. If we're going to do this, why not ban those HGVs from giving them the opportunity to park beyond that section of road? Because at the moment they do. So it would be just as easy to tag that on as well, ban HGVs from going beyond there so that they don't go down there and park up overnight and cause a disturbance. And also I do think it's very unfortunate, you are the applicant, but hey, it's Suffolk County Council. We should all get on and provide what residents want, and there are real concerns about this for residents.
So can we add that as part of this S106? Yes? HGV ban sign?
I mean, it's getting quite adventurous, Chair. I'm a bit concerned we won't be able to deliver what's being asked for here. They were here earlier, weren't they? Yeah. I have some nerves about that, actually, about banning HGVs. It seemed to have...
Mr Chairman, can I help?
Please stop.
Mr Chairman, can I help on that? I'm at the moment looking at some banning some lorries in a certain area, which I won't comment because I mustn't. But the local county councillor can take that up for you, and I would have thought that this removal of lorries or restrictions or some times where you cannot park for any length of time, they have to be enforced, is the right course of action to go. So I think you need to involve the local county councillor there, but there's no reason why you can't mention it through your planning, as our planning officers, to the local county councillor and ask him to look into it for you.
So that's a request to have a conversation rather than anything that would be in the decision notice. Yeah. Okay.
And also, I've been on this nearly 2 years, but we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay.
So you're happy? Right, so I have a proposer and a seconder. Can I please have you bring that?
Yes, it's as per the committee report, Chair, with the addition of reference to JLP policies, such as they are relevant to a certain extent, and also to add into the recommendation for the section 106 to include reference to a TRO or such other measures as may be deliverable.
Sound all right?
And for officers, as an informative, officers to discuss with the county council about JCVs not being allowed down there.
So that's what we're voting on. Can you please go to your vote?
Councillor Beer, can I take your vote, please? Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 11 votes for. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. 11 votes for, and that is the end of the meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 5th of April in the Elizabeth Frink room. We also have one scheduled for a fortnight after that. At this moment in time, those are still both on the cards. The one that was in for the 3rd of May, the day before the election, has been postponed. I formally close the meeting. Thank you.